audífonos, espera. Espera, pichín. ya va por 60%. Cuando este celular se cargue, yo lo voy a poner ahí para hacer el live. Y entonces, yo te marco.
large fraction of what's happening in my brain I am not aware of at all.
But what exactly is going on in your unconscious brain? What part of your brain is really in charge?
All day long, we're doing unscripted things that we didn't know we would be doing. Life is not scripted.
Find a word that has some meaning for you.
So you might think you've made a choice, representation. But in the back of your mind, you wonder, come on, was that really me? We might feel like we're in control.
This idea that we're in control of our actions seems critical to our sense of identity.
But our brains may have other ideas.
The brain is made of almost 90 billion neurons, but it produces this illusion that there's a single person inside our skulls. For every Pinocchio, there's always someone kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes.
There can be two separated minds inside one system. It's not just that motor, memory, language is in the brain. Your personality is up there. Your morality is up there.
We as humans know how environment and traumatic events change people.
Your brain. Who's in control? Right now on Nova. Have you ever thought that you've made a crystal clear decision? I'm just going to watch 2 episodes tonight. But the next thing you know, okay, just 1 more episode. Actually, it's time to go to bed. Well, I bet everyone else has already finished this season. Wait, why am I still watching this? Well, of course, the answer lies in your brain. Your brain contains multitudes. It's a complex and intricate 3-pound piece of matter. But you actually have no awareness of most of the things that are going on inside your brain. I'm neuroscientist and clinical psychologist Heather Berlin. And I'm on a journey to discover what's really driving the decisions you make.
No agency.
Who or what is really in control? There are important unconscious processes in your brain that you're not aware of. Most of the time, the brain is a coordinated, well-oiled machine with different brain regions working together in harmony. But under certain circumstances, when things are out of sync, you gain deeper insight into how the brain actually works. There's one thing we do every day with little to no conscious control. It's something you might spend a whole third of your life doing. Sleeping. When we sleep, we're supposed to be unconscious and at rest. But for some people, that's not always the case. These are people who sleepwalk.
Sleepwalking is a glitch in the system because our identity is not in control. And that's what a lot of my patients tell me, like, I didn't do that, that's not possible. This is not me. So sleepwalking, very common condition or phenomenon, simply says what the word is. You sleep, but during your sleep, you will walk. We take it for granted, right? But the walking is extremely complex. Just teaching a robot all the inputs and outputs for a body to move forward on 2 legs without falling. All of this, you don't even think about it. It works independently.
How is it possible to do complex behaviors like walking, eating, and sometimes even driving while sleeping? To find out, I'm visiting a sleep center at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. So tell me a little bit about what's happening with you at night and your sleepwalking.
Well, I've been doing some weird things. I painted a wall in my living room and one in my kitchen. I made a triangle, a perfect triangle in my kitchen.
So what do you think when you find that? Like,
I don't know, just I laugh because I did this.
Emmanuel Turing studies what's going on in the brain when someone sleepwalks. In the center, sleep patients are wired up with sensors that pick up eye and body movements, as well as their brain waves while they sleep.
So what are we looking at here? These blue lines?
These are the eye movements.
Okay, and then the black lines
These
here?
are the brain waves. So this patient obviously is lying in bed. And dozes off slowly, feels sleepy, and as we move on, he dives into deep, slow wave sleep.
During sleep, your brain cycles through phases of high and low activity. When the brain waves slow down, scientists call this deep sleep. But when someone sleepwalks...
First of all, everything looks good. You see the brain waves. everything is very, very monotonous, sort of slow waves. And then it's interesting to see there's a build-up of slow waves that the amplitude goes up, and then suddenly, so he's seemingly awake, sudden. It's like a sudden arousal.
I'm scared.
Very brisk, very fast, eyes open. There's a sort of a split then.
The patient looks like they're awake, but a couple of key brain regions seem to stay asleep.
There's part of the brain stays in slow wave sleep. It's such a deep stage of sleep. It's hard to wake up, and the other part of the brain is already awake.
One part of the brain that doesn't wake up during sleepwalking is called the prefrontal cortex. It's the region of the brain responsible for deliberate choices and self-awareness.
This prefrontal cortex is the decision maker. The other areas of the brain can mostly work independently of that. So essentially, so many parts of the brain can be engaged without conscious awareness of it.
During sleepwalking, the motor cortex, which controls movement, the visual cortex, which processes visual information, and the parts of the brain that coordinate behaviors like balance and speech can all become active without engaging the prefrontal cortex.
And what exactly are you doing, ma'am?
It's a special code.
Experiences of sleepwalking reveal that being conscious is not an all or none situation. Our unconscious makes a lot of everyday decisions for us.
For starters, boring stuff like regulating your heart rate and your temperature, deciding when to take the food in your stomach and move it down into your gut. Like, thank God we don't have to be aware of all that stuff.
Motor function, sensory function, motor sensory integration, memory representation, all of this is happening below the surface, like the inside of clockwork.
When you sleepwalk, the brain regions that control your movement, vision, and breathing can get up to all kinds of mischief without you even knowing it. But there's one case where even those regions check out during anesthesia.
We know that there are drugs that can give you anesthetics that would remove your conscious experience.
And we all know that consciousness comes in degrees. We can lose consciousness in sleep, then lose it in a more profound way when we are under general anesthesia.
When I was a young researcher working in anesthesiology, I saw this firsthand. So what happens to your brain activity when you go under? Neuroscientist Emery Brown is measuring the line that separates being conscious from being unconscious.
I want to guarantee my patients that when I say you're unconscious, you're not going to perceive pain. You won't be moving around. You won't remember anything that's occurring. Your heart rate and blood pressure and other physiological systems will be well controlled.
The patient is undergoing surgery. But before the surgeons can operate, the anesthesiologists have to put her under, render her unconscious with special drugs.
I'm starting to give you medicines that might make you feel kind of drowsy.
Look straight ahead. Look straight ahead. So her eyes move as we'd expect them to move.
So you're moving your head, but your eyes stay straight.
Just watch them for a minute. Can you see my finger here? Follow with your eyes. And if you can't follow it anymore, tell me, all right? Can you hear me? See, her eyes are fixed now.
Yeah.
Because it EEG was a large slow oscillation. See?
Yeah.
Her brain stem is out.
That's it. That's it.
When you go under, it can feel like 1 second you're here and the next you're out. What's going on in the brain when this happens? Emery uses a device called an EEG. Set of electrodes that rests on the scalp and detects electrical activity in the brain. That activity comes in the form of waves.
The brain generates brain waves or oscillations. And they're oscillations. see when someone's conscious.
These brainwaves are measured by their frequency, how fast the waves come and go, and by their amplitude, how small or big the waves are.
I look at your EEG. When you're awake, you're going to have a very rich response. When I anesthetize you, it goes away. And so the difference between those two states represents the transition from being conscious to the unconscious. See the oscillations, they're really big now.
And before, so they were just sort of a little...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you're awake and fully aware, your brainwave activity is diverse and dynamic. It looks kind of like an exciting conversation. But when anesthesia drugs hit the brain, the activity is dramatically reduced to dull, slow, rolling brainwaves. The once dynamic conversation becomes an unintelligible hum.
If you alter how the parts of the brain communicate sufficiently, you can make someone unconscious. So that's what the drugs are doing. They're altering the way the various parts of the brain communicate.
There's one region of the brain in particular that acts as a communication hub, the thalamus. It's made up of two parts, each of the size of a walnut, and sits deep inside your brain.
Thalamus is a central way station for all sorts of information processing. Auditory information goes through there, visual information goes through there, pain information goes through there. If I could take out just one brain center to make you unconscious, it would probably be the thalamus, because it's such a central actor in processing all types of information.
After a couple of hours of surgery, the medical team is tapering off the anesthesia drugs. And the EEG reveals the patient's brainwave activity becoming more complex as she wakes up.
She started to take some breaths.
Yeah. Yeah, open your eyes wide and squeeze my hand.
Consciousness is really having active cognitive processing, being able to think and act.
Baby's all done, okay?
It's the integration of that information which allows us to start to understand how consciousness is actually formed.
Consciousness can obviously interact with the physical world like we can. We can use drugs to remove it. We go to sleep and we're not conscious. And yet it's tenuous at the same time. We can't say how any specific set of neurons working together produces consciousness.
It's so clear that anesthesia is some kind of change of consciousness, right? The whole brain is there, the pieces are there, but the messages aren't getting through in a way that makes for a conscious experience. And that's the difference between being aware and not being aware.
So the level of communication among brain regions is one difference between being conscious and being unconscious. That means that no single area of the brain is responsible for your consciousness. It's that communication that helps make you, you.
Now let's remember that the left hand is governed from the right hemisphere.
For some people, an entire half of their brain can't really communicate with the rest. These are people who have undergone split brain surgery, and it's as if they have two minds in a single brain.
Now the question becomes, what happens when you allow both hands together to try to solve the problem? And what we find out is that they fight over each other. One hand knows how to do it, and one hand does not, and so they more or less squabble.
The human brain contains two sides, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, right? And they are connected by a big bundle of fibers. It's called the corpus callosum. All the communication from one side of the brain to the other has to pass through this fiber bundle.
For some people with epilepsy, a seizure in one hemisphere can quickly spread to the other by way of the corpus callosum. But if that bridge is surgically severed, a seizure can no longer cross to the other side of the brain. In addition to treating epilepsy, these surgeries have also led to some astounding research into how the two hemispheres function.
With your left hand, make me the A-OK sign.
To learn more about these fascinating studies, I met two pioneers in the field, Michael Miller and Michael Gazzaniga. Michael Miller asked me to step into his lab to do a few simple tests, just like the ones he's conducted with patients after split brain surgery.
So Heather, what you're going to see are two shapes. They're going to come up on the screen. the shape on the left side of the screen with your left hand and the shape on the right side of the screen with your right hand. And I want you to draw them as quickly as you can at the same time. Okay?
Piece of cake, right?
Beautiful. Okay, I'm not sure what you're drawing over here, but that's okay.
We've been trying to get that much sleep last night.
The left side of the brain controls most of the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls most of the left side of the body.
Because I started out trying to do different things, and then they just started like sync up together.
Yeah. It's perfectly normal. So, I mean, what's happening is that the motor commands in one hemisphere are interfering with the motor commands in the other hemisphere.
It was basically impossible for me to force my hands to draw two different things at the same time. But for someone whose two hemispheres are disconnected, there's no interference. It's almost as if there's one mind controlling the left hand and a completely different mind controlling the right hand. And it isn't just movement that's split across the hemispheres. Only half of your visual field goes to each side of the brain.
When you're looking straight ahead, everything to the left side of that space goes only to the right hemisphere. And the opposite is true for the right side of the space.
The left part of the brain is where your language and speech centers are. It enables you to talk, enables you to understand language, and all the rest. And the right side of your brain is very important in the evaluation of emotions, evaluation of visual space. I'm going to give you a test.
If you look right at my nose, and I look at my hands, you tell me how many fingers you see, all right?
How many fingers do you see? You see two, right? Why did you see two? This one went to your left hemisphere. This one went to your right hemisphere, way over the other side of your brain. How does your left hemisphere know about it? That pathway, the corpus callosum. It transfers that information. Now I'm going to split your brain. And I do the same test. How many fingers do I see?
You see anything else?
You see one. You see this one because that goes straight to your left talking hemisphere. This one is still going to your right hemisphere, which has now been disconnected from your left. So your left brain can't talk about this. So you now say you only see one finger, even though your right brain is seeing this finger. It just can't talk about it because the highway that communicates that information has been cut.
Show me with your right hand what you said. Relax. Show me with your left hand what you said.
It's the most remarkable thing to witness. You know, there's this whole other entity in the head that's controlling the body and can understand and remember and feel and think all on its own, completely separate from the other side.
The researchers conducted tests to explore how a split-brain patient's two hemispheres work independently from one another, including a now famous experiment of a patient named Joe. By quickly flashing a word to just the left side of his visual field, that word would go exclusively to the right half of his brain, the half that can't talk.
So the only way we're going to know that it registered is if he can write something out. Okay?
With his hand that is controlled by his right hemisphere.
Exactly, his left hand. We flash the word Texas.
Look right at that. Seen it? Flash. Didn't see the word.
The right hemisphere is seeing it.
We're seeing it, but the right hemisphere at this point in his surgery cannot talk.
Right.
All right, I want you to draw for me that thing upside down.
So he claims to not have seen anything. Oh my God. Wow. He was able to do Texas upside down.
And what's interesting is he had no idea what he's drawing. We know
show him the word again, and I ask a different question about what he saw.
Once again, they showed the word Texas to just his right nonverbal hemisphere. So when asked about what he saw, all his left hemisphere can say is,
I'm aware of the word, I just didn't see what it was. Draw something that goes with that, a symbol of that.
Oh wow, so he draws a cowboy hat.
Clearly, his right hemisphere knows exactly what he's drawing. But his left is still confused. Like, doesn't understand.
Right.
What's that? Cowboy hat. Cowboy hat. Did you see Texas? No.
The split brain phenomenon suggests that there can be two separated minds, if you will, inside of a skull. The cooperation is on the paper, not inside the head. It's an astounding example of cross-cueing and management of two mental systems into one unified head. And the idea is maybe that's going on in us all the time too.
Each of us has a sense that we're a unitary being, but actually that belies the fact that each of us, each of our minds, is actually composed of lots of different pieces that are doing different things. And different information can be represented in different parts of that machinery. And so a search for where am I in all of this is a little bit misguided because the I is not such a unitary thing in the first place.
That feeling of unity of me is actually distributed across almost 90 billion neurons. This illusion that there's a single person inside our skulls.
inside your brain are over 100 distinct regions. Many different systems in the brain control what you do, from movement to vision to speech, and even social interaction.
I think most human beings like to believe that their mind is under their own control. If I want to, I can stand up right now. I can do that. And that gives me, I think, the false belief that everything I do has been chosen by me. And if there is a story from the brain to tell, it is that we are quite wrong.
Not only are there multiple parts of your brain influencing you, but there are things in the world around you that influence your brain, including other people.
How we act and who we are in our lives is hugely determined by the expectations of the people around us.
The brain helps us be the most social species on the planet. A lot of our brains are devoted to understanding other people.
Our brain doesn't operate in isolation. We constantly learn, take, compare to other brains.
Our brains have evolved to be able to effortlessly reason about other people. And emotions similarly have evolved as ways that guide our behavior.
So how exactly do emotions and the emotions of others influence our brains? Neuroscientist Luke Chang studies how emotions like greed and guilt affect our decision-making.
Hey Grace, we're going to start up the scan. Go ahead and make your decision. Okay. You tone it down. Yep, you can hit next.
So, what are you guys looking at here? What's the study about?
So she's playing an investment game with another participant who's outside the scanner.
Luke scans the brains of study participants while they play a game from behavioral economics called the trust game.
This is a cooperative game where one person has some sum of money and they can choose to invest any amount of that money in their partner.
That investment grows. So then the study participant has to decide. They could be greedy and keep all the money, or they could be generous and give some of the investment back.
We've always been really interested in why you people...
In a quarter mile, keep right to stay on I-20 East. Follow signs for Meridian.
might be driving their behavior to act cooperatively in this game.
So you're balancing making these decisions between getting that kind of dopamine reward hit.
Keep right to stay on I-20 East.
Versus being balanced by those feelings of maybe guilt when you're not cooperating or helping somebody else out.
Continue on I-20 East for 238 miles.
When someone is feeling guilt.
those regions ended up being something called the insula. Signals about having this gut feeling that maybe this isn't a good idea or I'd feel really bad if I did that. Those are the signals that originate from the insula that allow us to make decisions to avoid harming someone else.
Luke likes to think of it kind of like a thermometer and a thermostat.
If you try to think about how a thermostat might be mapped onto the brain, one region might be more like the thermometer detecting the ambient temperature in the room.
When it comes to reading the room, our brain's thermometer seems to be the insula.
But all that information needs to go somewhere else and be integrated with other types of information.
That's our brain's thermostat, a region located inside the prefrontal cortex that processes our emotions and helps regulate our behavior. And while your thermostat can usually help you take control of your emotions, what would happen if it went out?
There's a famous patient named Phineas Gage.
Phineas Gage was a railroad foreman who was working in Vermont, and he was tamping down a hole that had gunpowder in it. And the gunpowder ignited, sending the rod through his eye, up through his brain, taking out a big patch of his brain in the process. At first, people thought, well, this is a miracle. This man has been unscathed from this accident. He had memory, he had language, he had motor control. But of course, his friends noticed a difference.
His life fell apart. He had a hard time holding a job. He lost all of his friends, and he really just struggled.
His personality made him more fitful, irreverent, more profane. He was cursing a lot, lewd behavior, so he had sort of no filter. We now know that the parts of the brain that he sort of surgically excised were involved in emotion and control.
Over 100 years later, neuroscientists mapped the regions of his brain that were harmed in that horrific accident. Areas of his prefrontal cortex, including the brain's thermostat, were damaged, which might account for why he struggled socially. He couldn't regulate his emotions or process how other people might react to his behavior.
And that was the key moment, I think, in neuroscience history, when people realized, oh, it's not just that motor, memory, language is in the brain. Your personality is up there. Your morality is up there. Things that make you, you are there.
I think we all kind of know intuitively that emotions impact our decisions. So what sort of extra information is this giving us?
In a lot of the scientific work that's been done on studying emotion and decision making, people have really focused on how emotions lead us to make worse decisions, maybe even irrational. And I actually don't think that's true. If you have a goal to not want to harm others and to do what's going to be in your self-interest, emotions are actually helping us make better decisions.
We are, in fact, the company that we keep, because other people bring out parts of us and strengthen us in particular ways.
How you make decisions, how you behave, how you think about yourself. All of these processes we develop by mimicking and interacting and synchronizing with other brains.
One thing that we all share as humans is that social life and social contact is an incredibly important part of what our brain processes. Our brains are in detail influenced by every experience we have. Every moment, every sentence, every image changes your brain.
And certain experiences are so profound, so extreme, that they can impact brain biology from one generation to the next. Neuroscientist Bianca Jones-Marlin is studying how your ancestors' experiences might control how your brain is wired today.
We ask how trauma affects the brain, how trauma affects the body, and really how trauma affects generations. People in the world suffer from traumatic events, and these traumatic events aren't just a one-time change in their brain and their body. It actually continues for seemingly their lifetime.
Bianca's research is inspired by her upbringing.
My parents, my biological parents, were also foster parents, so I had foster siblings and adopted siblings growing up. Only now, as a scientist, I realize that that motivates a lot of the questions that I ask. How do we understand what happens when kids are born into trauma and optimize what we do have for better generations?
One insight comes from an event during World War II.
At the end of World War II, the Netherlands were cut off from food by Nazi troops because they decided to protest through the country. And during this period of time, it created a man-made famine. There was starvation, death, there was trauma.
Not only did those who suffered during the famine experience health problems, but some of their children and even their grandchildren had metabolic issues.
So people began to ask, how does an experience of a parent, of a grandparent, change offspring?
Researchers began to discover that your environment and your experiences can change the way your genes are activated in your body and in your brain.
It's not like you get your genes and it's set in stone. They're constantly changing based on the environment.
To see this in action, Bianca studies mice.
We're able to map the whole genome of mice, target certain areas of that genetic code, and use them to answer the important questions in science.
So how could stress and trauma alter the biology of the mice's offspring? To find out, Bianca paired the smell of almond with an electric shock.
Because mice really navigate the world and rely heavily on the sense of smell, we use olfaction, pair it with the Lightfoot shock, and we observe changes in the brain and changes in behavior.
The mice's noses changed.
We're able to look at the cells in the nose that only respond to almond, and what we observe is that after the Lightfoot shock and the presentation of almond coincided, there are more cells in the nose that express the almond receptor. It's as if something in the milieu of the nose says, almond's important in this environment, we need more cells like you.
Mice grew more cells that responded to the smell of almond.
Each one of these green dots you see here, these are neurons. They're cells that can respond to the almond smell. These red dots are cells that were born after the presentation of odor and shock. And this cell right here, this red and green cell, is a cell that was born after the presentation of almond and shock that also responds to almond. This is the cell that we want to look at to see what information is inside, because we see more of these after the odor and shock pairing.
Remarkably, these changes were actually passed down to the next generation.
The offspring, kids of the parents that were shocked with odor, were born with more cells that express the almond receptor, which means there's a memory that somehow is maintained in sperm and egg through implantation and represented in offspring. It is as if we are observing a change in evolution over the time span of one generation. And I just think that's fascinating. Because we as humans, you know how environment and how traumatic events change people. Just being able to take the science of that and being able to show that, we're just justifying what we already know as humans, what society has known for a long time, what individuals know. We just want to bring that to an undeniable truth.
Our brains are not static. We try to make sense of what's happening right now. But we also try to make sense of what happened a long time ago and to have like this grand picture of our life as a trajectory.
Our ability for conscious awareness. It's a magnificent ability, this ability to reflect on our own minds, but it also leads us astray.
I have memories, plans, I have these feelings of agency over my actions. But what the science itself is telling us is that these things aren't necessarily bound together. Different aspects of the self can be manipulated or even taken away altogether.
Your biology and the choices you make are all molded by your social interactions and even your family history. And yet we feel like we have control, like we have agency, right?
An agent is somebody that is the author of their own story. But actually, most of what's happening in our brain, we are not conscious of. And I think this gets you starting to think, wait a minute, is really everything under my control?
Neuroscientist Uri Maus is putting our sense of control to the test.
We feel like we're in control. But where exactly does that feeling come from? And how does it work?
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us, agentically and out of your own volition.
Of course.
Before we start, let me give you this envelope.
Okay.
Please don't let anybody touch it, and don't look inside, but we'll need it for later on.
For later. Okay.
To show me how my sense of control isn't always what it seems, Uri kicked things off by trying to get me to question my ability to choose by using a magic trick.
So, where would you like to sit?
Where would I like to
It's really up to
It's
you.
really, I have a choice?
You have a choice?
All right, so I'm going to sit here.
You're going to sit over there?
Yes.
So, how about just before you sit down, if you don't mind, let's see what this says.
Oh my God. Okay.
So
then that one obviously says the same thing, right? No.
I can see what this one says. This one says...
Oh, come on. So I'm not predictable? You don't even know me yet.
I really don't know how he did that. I'm not totally convinced, but I'm starting to question, how do I know when I have made a decision?
If I may, let me give you, as a present, a book. Here we go, this is yours, and I will just ask you to leaf through it and find a word that has some meaning for you.
All right, I got it.
Can you tell me what the word is?
Representation.
Please write the word down, representation, and just stick that sticky note somewhere.
Okay, all right.
We'll come back to that later. But for now, I'm starting to see how choice and agency aren't always so straightforward. So to find out what's actually going on in the brain when our sense of control is in question, I took a look at a trial designed by postdoctoral researcher Alice Wong. A volunteer from the lab, Tomasz, is being fitted with a transcranial magnetic stimulation device, TMS for short. It generates a strong magnetic field that can send signals to your brain.
The idea is that you stimulate the brain using a focused magnetic field, and if you stimulate that in the right part of the motor cortex, that's a part of the brain that actually controls your fingers. It's like you're pulling on a string here. Every time you pull it, the finger goes.
With the device hooked up, the researchers can make his finger jump involuntarily by sending a signal to his motor cortex.
We're gonna be locating the spot of your motor cortex that moves one of your fingers. How
That works. That was the thinking that went up.
Sometimes they ask him to move his finger on his own.
Could you replicate the movement?
Something like this.
Remarkably, by recording the small electrical signals that travel from his brain down to his finger muscles, Alice and Uri can pinpoint the exact moment that Tomasz's brain has initiated a movement, almost 50 milliseconds before he actually moves. With this information, it's as though they can predict his movement slightly before it actually happens. So now his sense of agency is about to be put to the test.
Who initiated the movement?
It was me.
How much agency did you feel over the movement?
Not a lot.
Full agency? Okay.
Normally, the researcher isn't in the room, and all the questions are conducted by the computer.
Who initiated the movement?
I don't know.
How much agency did you feel over the movement?
I would say some agency.
In some instances, just as Tomasz decides to move his finger, the researchers use the